Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to our Facebook Live. And it's a pleasure to have everybody here. And today is, it's middle of December already. I know I'm on nights next week. And then there's the winter vacation. And those of you who are Jewish know that the holiday season does not exactly match with the Christmas season this year. And yesterday was the first night of Hanukkah. Today's the first day. So everyone who celebrates Hanukkah and potato latkes, have a great holiday. And you don't get off from work, so it's not that great a holiday. And then we will be here during the Christmas break, I think, and the New Year's break, and we'll be doing Facebook Live. And we are just finishing up a lot of the stuff for the year. We're finishing up some of the apps. As you know from the RSNA, 2 new apps are available. One on pancreas pearls and one on adrenal. And then we are updating the quiz, the lectures, a couple other things, and working on some of the new things so we can win the Mini Award in 2018 as well. So we're working on a bunch of new things, and again, we are working on a bunch of lectures. I just did a number of lectures on coronary, which you'll be seeing the beginning of next year. So I think we're interested in hearing any suggestions, thoughts, comments about what we should be speaking about. And we always are looking forward to getting people's comments, suggestions, and ideas. So I did arrange to have a guest speaker today, and I do have a guest speaker, but the first guest speaker is stuck doing a procedure. And the second guest speaker is trying to put out a few fires. And I went to my office and I did find a third guest speaker, Mr. Potato Head. So this is your basic Mr. Potato Head. It has like a bandana or something, but I couldn't figure out how to put the bandana on and keep it up. It also came with glasses, and I couldn't figure out how to put the glasses on. So we have Mr. Potato Head here. Just, I guess I got to move him a little bit closer so you can see him on Instagram. Okay, there's Mr. Potato Head. Everyone sees him. Okay, so we have the topic I was actually going to discuss today was something people have actually asked us a little bit about, which was in terms of recruitment and workflow and everything else. So I thought I would speak about that. And for this, it's good to have Mr. Potato Head here, but we won't be. If he has any comments or suggestions, we'll do it. So one of the things is, like everybody, this is a good day if you're looking for a job. Our fellows essentially all have jobs, really good jobs, different places they wanted to go. Some of the fellows will be staying in the area. We're hiring. I'm looking for a head of ultrasound. If anyone's watching who does ultrasound and wants a great opportunity, that's one thing. And we're always recruiting faculty as we keep growing and as our academic mission expands, so we are looking for faculty. And so one of the things that's interesting these days, as you look at a different generation of people working, and this is also a little bit based on the fact that I spoke to a number of people at RSNA, and one of the biggest trends at RSNA are these big companies, Rad Partners, VRAD, that are like 700-800 radiologists in groups. And in the old days, a few of us were reading, and then we would read till we were finished. The list was this long, we'd keep banging away, and only when we finished, we went home. Now, things are a little bit more structured. Perhaps that's better. People work a certain number of days. People work shifts, so you may be working 8 to 5 or 5 to 12 or 11 to 7, depending on the different groups you work with. Some people only work nights, and that's a lot of what the teleradiology business is, but some people also work days. The teleradiology business, as the teleradiology groups expand in terms of expertise and cost, and as companies like, I think it's VRAD, become part of big conglomerates that are on the stock exchange, where you're looking at revenue, you need to really figure out how you can maximize revenue and minimize the cost. So that becomes very important. I've been to a few places. I was at Mayo Clinic last year where they mentioned to me that not only do they define the number of work days, but also how many films you read in a day. And I'm told that places like Kaiser have the same thing, where there's a set number of CTs you read or MRs or plain films, that you read a quantity, whatever that prescribed quantity is, and that's it. It also, in many ways, it makes it easy. If I told you you work X number of days and you read this much in a day, you know what to expect. And it's not like, I'm working more than you, who's working less than she or more than she. And, I read faster than you, and so I read more and I should get paid more. There's a number of different things you can do, obviously, with RVUs and people being reimbursed on the different scales. But I seem, when I speak to people, more and more is becoming a lot more very regimented, where things are much better defined. The old business model in radiology and most of medicine, which was just keep doing and doing, is being replaced by let's quantify and define how many widgets you do. Now, I guess there's both pro and con to that. It's maybe easier to calculate staffing. It's easier to figure out how many faculty you need, how many people you need working. And also perhaps it's a much fairer system that the fact I read faster than you or you twiddle more than me, I don't get punished. I don't read 30% more cases than you do because I'm more efficient. The fact that I don't go down and get coffee 9 times a day or twiddle around, perhaps that's a better thing. Now, of course, there's a balance, because if you say you need to read films and then you can go home and you don't need to do anything else, then people will sit in a dark corner, never speak to the techs, their colleagues, the residents, the fellows, and just read a whole bunch of stuff as quickly as they can and then go home. So it's really finding a perfect balance that indeed becomes very critical. It's that balance of how do you have a really good work environment where people are successful, where people want to be there, yet at the same time, kind of come up with these boundaries, which in some sense are perhaps artificial boundaries, but in some sense, perhaps, in an era where people like things more defined. People don't talk about clarity. People talk about transparency. Most places you work are not transparent and there's no clarity. And why things are the way they are is because that's why things are the way they are. And, the generation, the current generation coming up, really wanting transparency, whether it's how the money's spent, what we do with the money, how we decide on structure, things like that. It should be interesting to see these changes evolve. Now, I know in our department, one of the things we're looking at is the same thing, like every department is. How do you define how much someone needs to work? It's a very tricky thing. Within a department, also, it's hard to quantify things, because if you're in body imaging, we work, weekends and nights. We cover cardiac, we cover MR, we cover ultrasound. If you're in mammo, you don't have the night thing. And if you're in intervention, then you're getting called in to do procedures in the middle of the night and on the weekends. And if you're in nukes, you do an occasional lung scan, perhaps, or a bone scan. So it's really hard as you go from division to division. Things are similar, but things are significantly different. It's much perhaps easier to make similarity within a division, but that alone is even hard. Trying to go across divisions can be much harder. So that indeed is a challenge. And then how do you do it in a way that makes everybody happy? So first of all, I should step back and say there's nothing you could do that will make everybody happy. You could say no one needs to work and read more than 5 cases a day. At some point, someone will say, well, what about 4? Or my 5 cases were harder than your 5 cases, or I had more slices than you did. There's always some way of arguing about something, and human nature is human nature. So that's kind of an interesting thought process on this. And, we have a number of people online from Peru. Hello, Peru. I did the Inca Mummy with the National Geographic from Peru. And hello to Chicago and Edinburgh, Texas. And you, Scott, says you work until you're tired, you sleep until hungry, repeat. Well, that's a strategy. I don't think that strategy is going to work these days. No one's going to follow you. And so I'm curious if anybody has any good ideas, besides John Biacchino, has any good ideas about, what we should be doing. How does your group work? What's worked well? What hasn't worked well? What are the challenges? Where do you see the groups going? There also is, interesting questions like, does everyone work the same? And so in academics, assistant professors, associate, full professors, should you all work the same? Should you work less the more senior you are? One could argue perhaps you should work more you're more senior because you've already, quote unquote, made it, and the junior people need more time off to build their careers. Of course, then you could say if you're senior, well, hey, I earned it, and I'm really busy, and I'm on committees, and I'm on this, that, and the other, and you want me to mentor those junior people, so you better give me time off. If not, I'm not going to mentor a soul. So you can see the problem is everybody comes at things from their own perspective. So how do you manage to do that if you're a department and you want to be fair to everybody? Again, knowing if everybody complains, then probably you're being fair. That's sort of an old rule, right? If nobody complains, you probably didn't come up with a good idea. If everybody complains, it's probably such a good idea because nobody's happy that must be a great idea. So if anyone has any thoughts, we'd love to hear it. Again, at RSNA, there was a lot of discussion about this, both academic practices going more to fixed time, as well as private practices. And I think particularly as the groups get larger, as you keep taking more and more people, as you're doing this true 24/7 coverage, the shifts need to change. Not everybody can work the day shift. So there's a day shift, there's a night shift, there's an in-between shift. Some people can rotate on 2 of them. Some people can rotate on 3 of them. Some people, particularly the shifts that are maybe not as desirable for most people, which is, let's say, the overnight shift, maybe that's one person. That's all that person does, and that's typically the strategy. But it's a difficult strategy, I think, to come up with and come up with a really good solution. I'm also curious what people are doing with amount of films read. That's just another question. Does everyone just, in the old days, you would divide up the piles of jackets, and of course, if you were the guy dividing, you would make sure you got your pile had the pre-op chest x-ray and didn't have like 10 bone surveys. So, one of those killer bone surveys outweighed another 20 cases. So, how do you do that? Do you say you have a computer randomly just assign 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, if 3 of you are reading, and that you get every 3rd case, and then it doesn't look at things? Or is there a different way? I mean, we could do things somewhat by structure. I'm a pancreas expert, you're cardiac, you're chest. So target things more to the expertise, which is a good thing, which is what we do and like to do. But that gets hard, again, because it's such a mix of cases. And unless you have the right mix of people working, that could be a challenge. So a lot of this is structure. Now, a lot of the structure can be done by computers. Remember, we used to do the schedule by hand. That was okay, but it was a pain in the butt. Now we do the schedule a little bit by hand, but mainly on the computer. The computer keeps track. You can have accurate numbers, how many times people worked, who covered nights, who covered days, how many days people worked. So all of those things can be really seen and really structured. And it's my opinion, I think, that you will be seeing much more structure in radiology groups. I'm perhaps not a big fan of that in general, because I like to think that people work together as a group, and I help you, you help me, we just all work together till the list is done. But perhaps that's very naive, that people want their own pile, their own stack, their own work, and that way they know they're doing it or not doing it. If they're doing it faster, then they get out earlier, they get more research time. If they do it slower, perhaps they need to stay longer. So it's, again, something that's very interesting. I'm not sure exactly how this will play out, but I think as you go to a millennial work environment, things have to change, because they surely will change. So we'll look forward to that. What else can I tell you? Those are kind of the main things. I think this whole idea for, of these processes, I think it becomes important to me, because as we're recruiting, I want to make sure we're making people the right offers. I want to make sure we're offering people what seems attractive to them, what they would like to do, what they would like to achieve, what they expect. So again, we want to do that. So let me see, any more questions? not a lot of questions today. I know that people will be asking questions remotely. Let's see. I'm looking at our Instagram. We're on Instagram as well. And we're in Colombia. We're in Russia. We're in China. We're in Mars, which is what President Trump suggested. So we're ahead of the U.S. that we're now having people on Mars watching CT as Us. And they send regards to everybody, just in case you have a question. So bunch of people on Instagram, so you can follow us on Instagram as well. So I think we'll just maybe stop there. And if anyone has any comments, good suggestions, you can put it on Facebook. This Facebook Live shows up in about 5 minutes, so you can watch it again or just add comments. You can email me, or you can email Mr. Potato Head. Mr. Potato Head will probably get back to you a little bit faster than I will. He's a very, very fast typer. And with that, see you next week.